What's up, guys? It's me, JellyKnees, and now that we've had patch 0.4.0 for about a week, I did want to go over the patch notes and see and tell you guys what I thought of each thing and what could potentially be improved for the next patch as well. So let's get right into that. So we've got the beginning here. They changed hero experience, which I think this was a good change, but also it didn't solve one of the problems of experience. So instead of taking 90 XP to hit level 2 now, it takes 280. And they increased the amount per level increase that it takes from 50 to 100. So I think that that's warranted, right? It kind of lengthens out the game a little bit, kind of slows down the snowball because you're not able to level up as quickly. However, they also balanced everything to give XP based on the new system, so it didn't change that much, really. It feels a little bit better to hit level 2 in lane, but when you're in the jungle, you can still take blue and then 2 camps and be level 3. So the problem with that, and this was a problem prior to patch 4 as well, is that the junglers are going to show up to a lane, be it left or right, level 3 against level 1s. So there's a huge advantage to that unfortunately didn't get fixed in this patch, and I'd love to see in the next one. Next up, we have the kill gold and XP bounties, which is a huge feature that Fault needed. Fault desperately needed something that could bring people back into the game if they were being shut out, right? Or made it harder for the people carrying on the other team to keep just snowballing themselves forward because they kept killing the same person that was having issues or that couldn't play well or was brand new to the game for that matter. So they added a kill streak for 300 past if anyone's got a kill under their belt. Then it goes upwards from 300 to 1,000 based on how many kills you have. Now, while I think that this is a good system, I don't think it should take place until after the first kill. And the way that this is worded, I haven't been able to test this very accurately in game, but the way this is worded is it sounds like you get 1 kill and now you're just worth 300 gold instead of the normal 150. So that's weird to me. That it should be a kill streak. It shouldn't just be I got a kill, now somebody killed me and they're getting bonus gold for that. It needs to be 2 or more in my mind. Vice versa though, death streaks now give the person killing you less and less gold, which I think is a huge change. They also split the experience across assists instead of just pooling it. So I think that all of this is a very, very valid set of changes. I just wish that the kill streak gold reward started 1 kill later. Next up is the basic attack projectiles. And this increase blew my mind because I've always felt in Fault prior to this patch that, especially on carry, hitting minions just felt off. It never felt like my cursor or the reticle had to be on the minion to get the kill if I was moving. I always had to lead the target by a considerable amount. And this increase of projectile speed fixed that for me, right? I could not get used to it and it was screwing me over on farm. But the second I was able to get this projectile speed increase, my farm went through the roof. It just made it so much easier. And that combined with a minion change, which we'll talk about in a second, huge. I think fantastic change right there. They also decreased the field of view slightly and the camera positions tweaked. So for me personally, I like the field of view better. It feels a lot more like Paragon did. However, what I had to do was I had to increase my sensitivity of my mouse to compensate for that slightly. And they also increased hero acceleration, which I think is great, but it's not quite enough. It needs to be slightly higher in my opinion. Now, the next one is kind of controversial, and I've talked to a lot of people about their thoughts on it, and I don't think that this change did what they hoped it would do. I think it's a valid change. It just wasn't implemented correctly. They changed move speed to be consistent among types of characters. So, for instance, they had the ranged carries and burst casters as the lowest move speed, and now melee assassins and fighters are the highest move speed. So burst casters like Gideon are now the slowest move speed in the game, where melee assassins like Countess are now the fastest. I don't think that that's the right hierarchy, to be honest. The thing that really gets me about this, and you may have noticed that in patch 0.4, Boris has made a reappearance and being very, very strong. They nerfed Boris in patch point 3 in that they reduced his base move speed. When they made this change, they actually reverted that move speed change back to what it was originally. So now Boris is back to that original move speed. And yes, his abilities still are slightly nerfed, but I think that's what brought Boris back forward. And now he's being played a lot more and being more consistent than he was prior. So there's some weirdness there that I don't think they looked at, but they could easily fix that into the future. Next up is the lane minions, which this change I think feels great. They increased the amount of minions from 4 to 6. So it's now 3 ranged and 3 melee minions, which I think is incredible. They no longer increase throughout the length of the games. You no longer get waves of 8 to 10 minions in the later in the game. They reduced they kind of respect all of the minions to match this change though. So the health is spread out, the damage is spread out, and the damage they do to towers has been slightly increased actually across the board. So from you can see from 30 to 45% for melee minions and 45 to 70% for ranged. So I think that's all valid changes, and I'm really glad they were able to do that. They also increased the experience gain in lane to help you reach level 18 faster. But like I said, it still doesn't feel good enough that you can be like level 2 by the time the jungler at level 3 comes and ganks your lane. So the lane minions are also now gaining extra move speed every 90 seconds. This I think is great. It makes the minions move a lot faster late game instead of you having to wait for them to come up in the lane. However, the caveat to that is that the lane minions now seem too fast at some points in the game. Like if you're stalling, right, and you're just holding out for the game to end, it does seem like the lane minions are too quick, and they just run in front of you and get cleared before you can do anything to help them. So it's a weird balance that I think the cap could be lowered just slightly, or at least the rate of increase could be lowered just slightly. But otherwise, I think it's a great change. Super minions are way more effective than they used to be. Almost too effective in my mind. So they now have 2 passives that they give. They have a reinforced armor, which means they take 70% reduced damage from AoE abilities, which is good. Then they now also have like a mini orb prime buff, which this is the part that I'm not sure I agree with, is that they grant 35 physical and energy armor to nearby allied minions, and it can't stack. I disagree that was what the super minions needed, because now you've effectively given that when you take out an inhibitor, super minions now grant 1/3 of the buff for orb prime to the minions in your lane. It kind of devalues orb prime, and with the raptor changes, that also devalued orb prime a little bit. So it's this weird limbo of it feels like orb prime isn't worth taking most of the time, and that was already an issue prior. Was orb prime was never really worth taking. It was worth the risk. So hopefully we can get some balance changes there, and I think if we just increase what orb prime does, then that could actually balance it out. So we'll have to wait and see what they do there. They now also spawn instead of siege minions. So every 3 waves, if you guys didn't know, you get an extra 7th minion, which is a siege minion. If you knock down an inhibitor now, it actually replaces that siege minion, but spawns every wave. So I think that's a valid change. You don't want it to snowball too hard into a lane. There's some general jungle minion fixes in that the spawn timers were actually set for 100 instead of 120 seconds. So 2 minutes now, like it should be. Now, this is probably the biggest change out of the entire patch, is raptors are no longer raptors. They're raptor. I think this is a great change. It's what everyone's been asking for. I think the implementation is too much. In the Discord, so basically, it's instead of 3 raptors, it's 1. This 1 raptor now gives 2 favor points across the entirety of your team. My issue with that is that before raptors were really snowbally. They were really important, and you could stack 3 aspect points or 3 favor onto 1 person, which is too strong. The issue is now we've effectively taken raptor, condensed it into 1, made it more difficult to kill, and now instead of getting 3 points effectively for your team, you're getting 10 points for your team. That's a huge shift in favor points. And actually, if you control raptors, now means that your entire team is going to have that many more aspect points rather than just one person. Before, yeah, it was hard to kill them, but let's say the carry had 30 aspect points. If you took that carry out, the rest of the team wasn't as strong as that person, so they kind of were easier to kill under that same principle. Now the whole team is going to have 30 aspect points, so just killing the carry may not be enough to take out the rest of the team because they're all super loaded since they've had the Raptor control. I think Raptor should only give 1 favor point to the entire team instead of 2. The other hard part with this change to Raptors is that Orb Prime only gives 1 favor point to the entire team. So somehow we're taking Raptors and giving more of a reward to the entire team than we are over Orb Prime, which de-incentivizes Orb Prime at the same time as that. So now we've got 2 things de-incentivizing taking Orb Prime and a hard focus on Raptors. Every 5 minutes after the initial spawn, your team should be there. Your team should be on top of Raptor, because if you control it and you can get 30 favor points, then you're just going to dominate the entire game most times. It's really hard to fight somebody getting that much extra stats from each of their items if they're building optimally, as well as taking all of the Raptors with their team. So they also changed Prime Helix to give more gold. So it's 300 granted to every member of the team that killed Orb Prime. Everybody gets 300 gold. I think that's great. That's no big deal. And they now get 800 experience each, which, again, I think that's a great change. But Orb Prime is a dangerous move. Orb Prime does enough damage and is hard enough to kill and takes long enough to kill that I don't think it's worth grabbing Orb Prime in 98% of situations. If the enemy team doesn't have 2 people dead, you shouldn't be going for Orb Prime. Pretty much ever. If their inhibitors are down and they're sitting in their base, you could go in, push the base, and win. There's no reason to risk taking Orb Prime in a lot of cases, unfortunately. So like I said, I hope they get that fixed in the future and it all works out. They fixed some lighting things. The lighting is a little weird. It looks like the whole game kind of got muted a little. It was really bright and shiny. And not that that's the way I want the game either, but now it seems like they almost probably went too far in muting it the other direction. The first time I loaded in, it was just kind of this it's just dreary looking. I don't know. It just felt weird to me. Lots of bug fixes. They had a really good fix where people could get on top of the Raptor walls, like Gideon, and now he can't do that. So he can't just sit up there and just throw pot shot spells at you guys, which is great. Muriel got a huge bug fix, but at the same time buff, because Muriel was struggling. And this doesn't put Muriel at the top tier, but it definitely brings her back into the light of being playable outside of the offlane Muriel. So her shield now properly gives the second shield, her E. This means that when you originally walked into her bubble, you gained a shield. When it then popped, you are also supposed to gain a shield. So this means things like Siren's Call, which gives you healing on your shields and makes them more effective on top of that, would be doubly effective for Muriel now that her second proc is working, which I think is a great fix. And after a couple games on Muriel, feels really, really good. They had some item changes. Substitution feels way better now because the range is longer. You don't have to feel like you're standing on top of the person you use subs on in order to do anything. Titan Fist got changed from energy damage to physical damage, which I think is fine. Titan Fist doesn't sound to me like initially just the feeling of someone saying like Titan Fist. What kind of damage would you expect that to do? Physical damage would be my guess. Conversely, though, P-Blade does not feel that way. P-Blade does physical damage. I feel like P-Blade should switch to energy damage, giving carries a little bit of hybrid, right? Not a ton, but just a little bit, and would make that like the feeling of a blade like that feels more like energy damage to me. And maybe I'm wrong. You guys, I know, will tell me, so that's perfectly fine. Magician got nerfed, which at first this felt like a lot with the mana changes they did last patch, and then now Magician getting nerfed. It felt like they're just like, there's too much mana on the field. But after playing with Magician, it feels right. It doesn't feel like you're using too much mana and that you can't regen it fast enough. Like if you're smart with your abilities, this change really won't affect you very much at all. Countess thank God, got nerfed really hard. And luckily she's still playable, but she got nerfed really, really hard. So her Q damage got decreased by 10%, the scaling on it, and it now has a recast delay. Now, one thing I wish they did was they told us the stats, right, of like how long before I can recast. So at least internally, I have a mental like, okay, now, right? Unfortunately, they don't do that, and I hope they do into the future. But she can't just blink right in front of you and immediately blink out with no consequences. Now that she has the delay, you can land a stun. You can land some kind of CC on her to stop her from going back so quickly. I think that's a brilliant change and much needed on her. Her E, the scaling got reduced by 20% and now has a recovery delay. So after she uses her E, there is a slight motion that she has to go back before she can do something else. She can't just instant chain everything together. And then her R scaling is reduced by 60%, which is just insane. From my experience, I played a couple games of Countess. She's definitely weaker, but if you play her well, you can still be that bursty assassin that you were before. You can still do a lot of those things. You just can't do it to the entire enemy team all at once, which I think is how she should be. She should be more single target oriented with just the slight AoE from her E and right click. Gideon got nerfed as well, but also a slight buff. So Gideon's Q damage was reduced just slightly, and the scaling was reduced as well, which is fine. His right click, which was just monstrously strong, got reduced in base damage and also reduced scaling, which is great. And then his R got a buff, actually, which I feel like Gideon's R was underwhelming. Because if you get stunned out of it immediately, or even halfway through it, it never felt good. It never felt like you did enough damage to be worth it. So now with this change, the scaling slightly increased by 7%, and then just the base damage increased as well. I think that's a great change that makes a big difference for Gideon's R, and I think it feels a lot better when you play him as well. Narbash's Thunk has the cooldown increased, which I think is very good. Late game with cooldown reduction, basically you could have that up every 4.5 seconds, 5 seconds. So this change makes it feel way better, and that it's a more balanced. I can't just thunk people every time we start a fight or anyone tries to run away. Steel, I'm not sure I agree that he needed the damage increase, but the stun reduce on his R, very warranted. Steel, I think, is still a must pick in games. You either need a Steel support, Steel offlane, or Steel jungle, because his ultimate right now is probably the most impactful ultimate in the entire game, aside from Narbash and Muriel now that she's playable again. So pick Steel, pick Steel, pick Steel, pick Steel, pick Steel, please. And finally, we have Twin Blast, finally getting the nerf he deserves. Thank the almighty Paragon Fault Gods. Okay? Thank you. Because the triple grenade spam was the dumbest thing on the planet and could half health like 3 or 4 people instantaneously. So adding this 0.6 delay, huge. Absolutely wonderful. I'm glad they did it. It doesn't feel terrible to use now. The delay, you definitely are aware it's there, but you can still get them out with relatively quick fashion, but it's just not instantaneous. There is some counterplay to it now, which I think is great and always warranted. Counterplay is always going to be my suggestion for things. If something's really strong, what can we do to counter it? Not necessarily why it needs to be nerfed immediately off the bat. So that is huge. It creates counterplay options against Twin Blast. I still think he's probably the best carry in the game. Sparrow definitely needs some help, and Murdoch's probably in a really good state. Twin Blast might need a couple damage number tweaks down just slightly, but otherwise I think him and Murdoch are in relatively good spots. But guys, that's all I had for the patch notes. I do stream 5 nights a week on Twitch. I will leave the link down in the description. Let me know what you guys thought of the patch notes, and I'm happy to talk with you all more about it down in the comments. And I will see you guys in the next one.